Joining me now on the phone, Jay Sekulow, counsel to the president. Jay, your initial reaction to the letter from the Attorney General today?
Well, we're absolutely thrilled. We have said from the beginning of this inquiry that there was no collusion and no obstruction, and the Department of Justice agrees with us. So you can't get much better than that. I think it was important to note a couple of things. That, number one, there was absolutely no evidence of any Trump campaign or anyone associated with the campaign conspiring or coordinating with the Russians in its efforts to influence the 2016 U.S. presidential election. That was, by the way, the entire basis upon which this investigation started. So there was zero evidence of that after thousands of subpoenas and documents and dozens and dozens of interviews. That was the conclusion. And then as to the obstruction of justice issue, I think the most important part of that is on page 3 it says, in cataloging the president's actions, many of which took place in public view, the report identifies no actions that in our judgment constitute obstructive conduct, had a nexus to a pending or contemplated proceeding, and were done with corrupt intent. And under the Department of Guidelines, under the Department of Justice guidelines, no charges could be brought. I think it's just a complete 100% vindication of the president.
Jay, do you think it was appropriate? The Attorney General quotes the special counsel's letter in saying that it said, quote, while this report, meaning the Mueller report, does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. There's been a big debate this afternoon about whether or not it was appropriate, first of all, for special counsel to put that in if he wasn't going to pursue potential charges, and secondly, whether the Attorney General should have put it out there. But certainly he had to make an explanation of the decision the Justice Department came to.
Well, I think the Attorney General did it because he had to make an explanation. Mm-hmm. Remember, it is not the job of a prosecutor under normal circumstances to exonerate, right? Their job is to either have a charge or not. What it sounds like the special counsel did, this is what it sounds like, I have not seen the report, was list out of facts, all of which were known publicly, did not make a legal determination as to what that would constitute or not constitute, and rather took it to the Department of Justice, under the Office of Legal Counsel, the Deputy Attorney General, and the Attorney General, which, by the way, is exactly by the book the way it's supposed to happen. That's because Bob Mueller, as special counsel, was an employee of the Department of Justice and subject to those policies and procedures. Now, also important here, Shannon, is the fact that this was not a situation where they did not move forward with any kind of action against the president merely because he was president. They expect to say the exact opposite. So this is a 100% vindication of the president. I understand exactly what that sentence means. They did not make a legal judgment on that. They sent that to the Department of Justice to make, which would be appropriate in a situation like this, and that's the determination.
Yeah, the president has said he wants this to be public. He wants the public to see it. The House voted 420 to nothing. Grand jury material, classified material aside, how much of this do you think should be released, and what worries do you as a member of the president's legal team have with respect to all of this being available now to House Democrats who are clearly looking for other things to pursue?
Well, let me address the latter first. So the House Democrats are looking for other things to pursue. The special counsel issued 2,800 subpoenas, executed 500 search warrants, obtained more than 230 orders for communication records, issued 50 orders authorizing use of pen registers, which is phone numbers, made 13 requests to foreign governments for evidence, and interviewed approximately 500 witnesses. So does that not answer the question about what the House is doing? That's purely politics, number one. Number two, with regard to the report, we're the private counsel for the president. Our view is that under the regulations, the Attorney General will decide what he can disclose and what he can't. Of course, national security material, 16 material would not be authorized, unless you have some kind of, court order. Absent that, I can't imagine that they would release grand jury material, which is 16, what is meant by 16 material, and obviously national security material. So the Attorney General will make a determination in the coming days as what he believes is appropriate to release, and that's what will be released, is what I suspect.
There have always, over the last few days before we actually had this letter from the Attorney General today, plenty of discussion about subpoenas, about subpoenaing underlying materials, about subpoenaing Mr. Mueller, Mr. Barr themselves to come up to the Hill. Can you foresee a scenario in which that would happen and potentially the Justice Department, at the direction of the president as head of the executive branch, would tell them not to comply with those subpoenas, and this would then wind its way, we would assume, to the Supreme Court?
That is a decision that the executive branch would make. That's an Article 2 decision. That's not the job of the private lawyers. But it was the same individual members of Congress that were calling Bob Barr the gold standard. Please let him finish his investigation. And then some of these members of Congress on your network and others said that the president was colluding, that others were colluding, that they knew he was colluding, it was treasonous. Remember those words that were being said? And what did the special counsel say? No evidence. None. I think that speaks volumes.
Any potential legal trouble for those who were so adamant in making these public statements about the fact that they'd seen evidence, it was in plain sight, they'd seen it with their own eyes, they had no question, it was there, and not leaving any daylight or gray area there?
I'm not going to say what their legal exposure would or would not be. That's not for me to say. I just think that moving forward, what everybody needs to do in the United States Congress, in my view, is legislate. Focus on legislation and helping the American people. This thing has been investigated for 2 years with an unbelievable depth. I rattled off the statistics of what was issued here. I think that speaks volumes. It speaks for itself.
All right, Jay Sekulow, counsel to the president. Thanks for weighing in as we have this breaking news this afternoon. Great to talk to you, Jay.
You too.
All right, as liberals and conservatives spin the special counsel's principal findings, let's talk with our panel to learn how this is all shaping the political world right now. Joined by Buck Sexton, former CIA analyst and host of the Buck Sexton Show, and Jammu Green, former Hillary Clinton advisor and Fox News contributor. Great to have both of you with us today.
Hey, Shannon.
Hi, Shannon.
Okay, so I want to talk about a couple of polls. Let's put up this first Fox News poll about whether or not the Mueller Russia investigation is viewed as legitimate or not. There are more people, 49% who say legitimate versus 39% who say bogus. So, Jammu, if they have confidence in Mueller, he says there's no collusion. Will that end this question of collusion for those on the left or the president's critics who believed it was there?
Well, there's no doubt, Shannon, that this is a victory for President Trump, and it is a victory for America. And if my colleagues on the left can't say that or recognize it, then that's a problem, because we don't want Americans colluding with a hostile government. That being said, there is also another victor here, and that is Vladimir Putin himself. Everything he set out to do within weeks of Donald Trump announcing his candidacy, he was successful in doing, in attacking our democracy, in attacking the trust, eroding the trust in our law enforcement agencies, our intelligence agencies. And so just like there's no doubt President Trump was exonerated on collusion, through the words of Attorney General Barr, they are celebrating in Moscow, and that is not good for America. So we win on one hand, but we lose on the other when we have exemplary public servants, like Chris Darwalt told you minutes ago, explained beautifully. Robert Mueller is one of those exemplary public servants, and he has been dragged through the mud. Our agencies have been dragged through the mud in the attempt by this president to undermine this investigation.
Okay, let me
we need these agencies to be strong.
Yeah, Buck, I think we all agree that you want to have public confidence for the American people in these agencies, but does some of this now prove what the president's narrative has been all along, that there was nothing there, that there were people who acted improperly in launching this entire investigation, many of them thinking that Hillary Clinton would win and they maybe wouldn't have to answer for some of these things?
Absolutely. I mean, President Trump is taking a much-deserved victory lap today. Everyone in the White House, and honestly everybody who voted for him and knew that for the past 2 years, this was a mass delusion. I mean, the evidence was never there. People were always getting well ahead of the facts on this one. The partisanship couldn't have been any more obvious. And if you're looking for who the losers are today, yes, absolutely, much of the mainstream media should hang its heads in shame, as was said before. That's absolutely true. But also the intelligence agencies, one of which I used to be a member of myself, they came out as at the top level, not the rank and file, at the top level, playing host to a cabal of former Obama administration officials who were using their power, using their access to try and thwart a presidency and honestly to stop a presidential election, too. So that really raises a lot of very troubling questions. The conduct at the FBI, the conduct at the DOJ, and at the CIA at the very top level was horrendous. And we've seen this now. We need more answers. There are a lot of questions now about how we got to this place, Shannon. I want radical transparency about the origin memos of the investigation. I want to know what was shown to the FISA court to the extent that we can see it, because there was obviously foul play. So while it's a day of exultation in some way, there's also, I think, an understandable outrage that a lot of Americans should feel that we even got to this point and we're put through 2 years of this absolute insanity.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how much of that was contained within the Mueller investigation, as there are demands for all of it to be released, how much of it we all get to see as the Attorney General promises that is forthcoming as quickly as he can possibly humanly get it done. Buck and Jammu, thank you for weighing in on the political considerations here.